I don't normally do videos like this, but this was a challenge I had going on in my head for a while, hence what you're watching right here and now. So for those who know me well enough, it's an undeniable fact that Spyro Year of the Dragon is perhaps one of my favorite video games of all time. This speaks true to both the OG 2000 release and the 2018 remake from the Reignited Trilogy. One of my favorite things about it is the fact that we have more additional characters to play as besides Spyro, each offering new playstyles and fresh gameplay mechanics throughout Spyro 3. Since Reignited is now on Steam and can be easily modded to hell and back, I was wondering if a mod is in place to allow us to play as these characters throughout the whole trilogy. Thankfully we can, thanks to a mod known as the Character Swapper. This allows you to switch between any of these characters on the fly from game to game. Just input the correct buttons and you'll be playing as Spyro, Sheila, Sergeant Byrd, Bentley, and Agent 9 throughout all of these games however you please. This got me wondering though, is it possible to beat the first game, Spyro the Dragon, with any of these characters? Quick disclaimer before we start, you're gonna have to bear with me and forgive the footage used to record these play sessions. I don't exactly have the strongest PC to run these games as good as I wanted to, but I'm making do with what I got. What matters is that I'm able to play Spyro on my PC at all. I also have other visual mods on during all this, so we might see some fun stuff along the way, like Sheila's stylish hat or this Spyro floaty direct from Crash Bandicoot 4. All this said, let's lay down the ground rules. 1. I must be able to beat the game or get far enough with any of these characters. Under almost no circumstance should I be able to use Spyro in any of these levels normally. 2. Since none of these characters can properly access flight levels, playing these special areas are out of the question. 3. All these characters must be able to meet all of Spyro 1's requirements for gaining from start to finish. That means Sheila, Sergeant Byrd, Bentley, and Agent 9 are tasked with collecting 10 dragons to get to Peacekeepers, 1200 treasure to get to Magic Crafters, 5 dragon eggs to get to Beastmakers, 50 dragons to get to Dreamweavers, and 6,000 treasure to get to Nasty's World. They must be able to meet all this criteria, and 4. Get to defeat Nasty North to finish the game. Can any of these characters beat Spyro 1? Let's get right into it. Starting in the Artisan World, I immediately remember that Nestor is the only dragon in the game you cannot skip. I can have these characters free him, but the scene will still play out normally as if Spyro is in control. This is one of those few instances where Spyro is allowed in this run. The other we'll delve into in a bit. It was actually fun taking these guys for a field day throughout this world, but there are some restrictions and limitations in their abilities here. To put it simply, there are some objects and enemies these characters can interact with while others can't. This Nork Thief for instance. Sheila cannot attack this guy for some reason, but she can deal with basic Norks just fine. Sergeant Byrd is also under this same limitation, being able to fire at every Nork in the room but the one wielding gems. Not even Agent 9 can shoot the guy down. Bentley, however, is capable of dealing damage to the thief, being able to collect the gems on his own run. When it comes to getting the high ground, Sheila's double jump is able to get her to great heights, and even her ground jump is able to reach the highest point in Clifftown. Sergeant Byrd is strictly overpowered in this regard, having no flying restrictions whatsoever. I could very easily take him out of bounds within these levels if I wanted to. Bentley is exceedingly limited in this case. He is simply not built for the platforming the majority of Spyro 1 asks of you. Agent 9 can jump much higher than him, but he can be just as grounded, being able to take him so far before you run out of options. With having gathered enough gems they need for artisans, it's time to move on to Stone Hill. And here's where my next tidbit comes in. Unlike Spyro 2 and 3, entering 1's levels function in its own special way. If I were to enter any of these levels without Spyro's flying animation, the game would automatically softlock and I can't make any more progress unless I restart the game. This is where we'll allow Spyro for the run. If you're about to enter a level, have Spyro serve as your means of transportation, then switch them back for any of the characters on their appropriate run. They can exit out of the levels on their own just fine and even use the air balloon scot-free, but as far as entering levels is concerned, look no further than Air Dragon to drop you off. Going into Stone Hill, I run into another snag as soon as the level begins. Sheila can't seem to come in contact with any of the enemies here. She can't attack the rams starting off this level. And yes, she can't even deal with the shepherds here. She'll continue to collect treasure through regular means, but enemies are gonna be where she struggles the most. She can also get up on the grassy hills without needing to use the whirlwind, so she's proven successful in gathering all the dragons here. Sergeant Byrd also excels at getting into high ground in this level. Unfortunately, he's met with the same limitations when it comes to fighting off enemies. And despite Bentley's brute force, unfortunately he cannot deal with the rams or the shepherds in this level. Agent 9, however, can deal with rams perfectly, shooting down everything in sight. All except the shepherds. There is always a catch to this, I know. Sheila can also grab the key in his cave, hop back out without needing to use the whirlwind, and unlock the treasure chest for more gems. She'll need to exit via the pause menu, however, because her ground jump isn't high enough to get her out of the secret room. Sergeant Byrd can also achieve this and fly back out no problem. Bentley can't even jump high enough to try and get the key, so he's forced to humbly leave the level with the ground he was able to cover. Luckily, Agent 9 has just enough height to jump down to the beach and get the key. Since using a whirlwind keeps him in a loop until you get out, as is the case with Bentley, the only way he'll be able to get to Gavin is to touch the water and drown, sending him back to the nearest safe point, and surely enough, extra gems in the bag. Next up, Dark Hollow. And being restricted against enemies is going to be the running theme of these characters' playthrough. Sheila, Sergeant Byrd, and Bentley all cannot deal with the Norks, even when their shields are down. Understandably, Sheila cannot attack the club-wielding Norks, but you'd think Sergeant Byrd's rocket launchers would be able to take them down. And it doesn't make sense that Bentley cannot do the same, deal with any of the bouncer Norks, much like everyone else. If you're Agent 9, however, then you're free to murder anyone that gets in your way. I should also mention that this is where they can stock up on fodder for health if needed be. Unlike Agent 9, who can interact with almost anything he comes across, Sheila, Sergeant Byrd, and Bentley cannot attack the sheep in Artisans or Stone Hill, initially making me think going for butterflies would be impossible. Thankfully, this isn't the case for the rest of the fodder moving forward. Town Square is where things start changing up. If you're Bentley, you won't be making much progress in this level other than grabbing the gems lying around at the start. He doesn't have the mobility to go up the steps leading to the first dragon, so he'll have to cut his losses from here and head out. Agent 9 can reach up the steps and get to Nils, but unfortunately he's stuck at the beginning all the same. He can, however, shoot all these bulls down because, of course he can. Sheila and Sergeant Byrd are free to explore the rest of the level all they wish. Sheila can double jump and even ground jump her way to areas where gliding is essential, and Sergeant Byrd needs no further explanation. The skies are all his to enjoy. Toasty proved to be tricky for our animal buddies. For one, none of these characters can attack the dogs as well as the shepherds guarding them. Since Bentley can't cover much ground, he can't even enter the castle from here, putting an end to his run before he can even reach the first boss, never mind the dragon beforehand. Sheila, Sergeant Byrd, and Agent 9 can progress through normally, but here's where things get interesting. As soon as they reach Toasty, immediately I find Sheila is unable to do any damage. I thought, made sense. Toasty required being roasted, and since Sheila has no firepower, she's left to only gather her consolation treasure and leave without even putting up a fight. Initially, I thought Sergeant Byrd would seal the deal since he has rocket launchers equipped, but if I learned anything so far, if Sheila's unable to deal damage to most enemies, then neither can he, and thus Sergeant Byrd is unable to fire at Toasty whatsoever. That leaves Agent 9, who can very easily snipe him from a distance if he so well desires. Once Agent 9 is able to take down Toasty, it was on to the Peacekeepers. Going into the second homeworld, I'm happy to report all these characters can interact with the Norks. Sheila and Sergeant Byrd, however, are incapable of catching up with them once they hide in their tents. This is where Agent 9 comes in to fulfill his thirst for sizzling bad guys. Sheila can also use her double jump to get to the other side of the hub without even needing to use the cannon. But I had to be sure not to touch the lava moving forward because even if you touch it once, there is no recovering from it even if you're saving yourself. Somehow the damage is already done. Sergeant Byrd can simply fly over to the other side, grab the key, and still be able to unlock this chest. Unfortunately, Agent 9 won't be able to cover much ground beyond this section. Now for this world's levels, being Dry Canyon, Cliff Town, and Ice Cavern. While Agent 9 will have the benefit of attacking enemies, Sheila and Sergeant Byrd will be gathering treasure through different means, avoiding these baddies when necessary. Agent 9 can reach the portal for Dry Canyon, but despite my efforts, he won't get much high enough to get to the other side. Sheila's jump mechanics can get her much farther in this regard, being able to cover enough ground to reach the other side of the level. And using Sergeant Byrd's great flying abilities, he can grab the key and reach the far off island in the distance for some extra treasure. On to Cliff Town, Agent 9 can't seem to attack the cape's enemies here, but he is, however, able to shoot down all the big mamas. And while he won't be able to reach the highest point in this level, he can still gun down all these buzzards in the distance for target practice. Sheila's jump mechanics is able to get her very far in this level, and Sergeant Byrd can easily put everyone else out of business going across the river. And in Ice Cavern, while none of these characters can deal with armored Norks here, Agent 9 can still attack your standard Norks with ease. Sheila can kick down the poles for some extra gems, and even reach the extra lives with some well-timed jumps. And of course, Sergeant Byrd can easily fly over to get this key, return to the chest, and gain some more treasure. With everything gathered, it's off to face Dr. Shemp. Everyone could lure all the Norks running towards them and have them commit jump dive for the gems they hold. And thankfully, all of these guys are capable of reaching Dr. Shemp. Agent 9 was a bit tricky, but if you position him just right after the whirlwind, he'll cover enough distance to land up top and be able to fight off the boss. Since Sheila can't deal damage to Dr. Shemp, she won't be getting as far as the first round. And since his rocket launchers can't affect this creature, Sergeant Bird can still reach the exit and still have access to the treasure chest lying beside it. With as much treasure as possible gathered and Dr. Shemp down thanks to Agent 9, it's on the Magic Crafters. It's here that I run into something interesting with the enemies in this world. All these characters can interact with them, but only after getting hit, so if they're going to be gathering treasure, it's going to be a risky move on their part. Luckily, they can interact with fodder here, so feel free to grab butterflies if they're ever giving you trouble. Now for the levels within. Sheila's going to have a hard time making much progress in Alpine Ridge, meaning she'll be able to grab some treasure, rescue the first dragon, and will have to call it quits since she can't carry on without gliding. Not even her double jump can get her far enough, and I've tried several times. She also won't be able to attack the druids throughout these levels, especially if she needs to get to the 2 rotating platforms and high caves, never mind all the enemies here in general. Fortunately, this doesn't matter much in this level since she can go about in the cave no problem, unless she gets mauled by the giant spiders. Some more treasure to grab on the ground she's able to cover, and it's off to Wizard Peak. Here Sheila can actually make her way through the secret entrance by the time the level starts. Some well-timed jumps and she'll be able to grab some treasure lying around. She can progress through the level just fine and make it to the exit with little to no issues, but she won't be able to make it to the far-off islands where supercharging is normally required. On the blowhard, and unfortunately, Sheila won't be able to deal with the boss whatsoever, so all she's left to do is gather all the treasure she can pick up. She can even make it to the exit with some well-timed jumps, and from here, she's finished off as much as Magic Crafters as she can. Unfortunately, this is where I get into the bad news. This is where the run for every one of these characters ends. As I tried them all out, they all ran into some issues that kept them from progressing any further. Because Bentley severely lacks the height and mobility for platforming, his limitations won't be getting him as far as 7 dragons rescued, only 3 short of the 10 required to move on the Peacekeepers. Agent 9 was able to get this far and fare much better than Bentley, but while he has no restraints against enemies throughout the game, there is one fatal flaw that plagues him from getting any further, and this one baffles the hell out of me the most, as it plagues both him and Sergeant Bird. None of them can break any of the treasure boxes at all. This includes the metal crates, jeweled boxes, and even the standard treasure chests. If they can't collect gems from any sort of boxes, that entirely hinges their ability to gather the 1200 gems required to get to Magic Crafters. I was able to get these 2 past 800 gems, but sadly no further than that. And finally, while Sheila can collect most treasure through normal means and be able to attack some enemies, there is one in particular in which she can't. And unfortunately, she won't be able to pass Magic Crafters because of it. The Egg Thieves. If she can't interact with Egg Thieves, she's unable to collect any dragon eggs to be able to pass through the game beyond this point, as the game asks for 5 dragon eggs in order to carry on. It's here that I realized I wasn't making much progress with either one of these characters despite my best efforts. With so few options left, I decided to opt for one final last resort. And the end result? I'm happy to report that this is well worth diving into. The first rule I stated for this challenge was that I cannot switch any of these characters out for Spyro other than entering levels. However, I never said that they couldn't switch out for each other. So long as Sheila, Agent 9, Bentley, and Sergeant Bird are the ones gathering treasure, dragons, and dragon eggs, this still permits me to swap them out in any circumstance. It was time to make like a Skylanders game and switch these characters out whenever they're called for. I've been taking notes of these characters' abilities throughout Spyro 1, jotting down all their limitations in the process. With this in mind, I can task them all accordingly in the following manner. Agent 9 will be our true means of combat throughout the whole game. Sheila and Bentley are tasked with collecting treasure, and in Bentley's case, bashing down certain enemies like the North Thief earlier. Sheila will also be able to get to high ground in certain areas, while Sergeant Bird will be able to get these guys much further and higher beyond their capabilities. Using this method, you can actually gather as much gems, dragons, and even dragon eggs as these guys can muster. And in some cases, you can even 100% some levels using them all together. Of course, they won't be able to deal with every single enemy in sight, but using the knowledge at hand, they'll still be racking up the required collectibles to get them moving throughout the game. Furthermore, I stated that Sheila couldn't deal with any of the egg thieves earlier. This speaks true to Sergeant Bird and Bentley all the same. But you know who can? Look no further. Fortunately and thankfully, Agent 9 is fully capable of dealing with egg thieves as well as any standard enemy. What's great about this is that he can also snipe them from far away, saving us the trouble of having to chase them down. Assuming you're doing everything right, you can get them through all of Artisans, Peacekeepers, and Magic Crafters without a hitch. And I have even greater news. They're fully capable of progressing through the game and carrying on the Peacemakers, having enough dragon eggs for the trip. They're still gonna need a ton of treasure and dragons for the later requirements soon to come. Business as usual, have Agent 9 gun down all the enemies in sight, bring in Sheila and Bentley to pick up any treasure boxes, and have Sergeant Bird shortcut through all the levels when necessary. This will even make everyone's favorite level treetops to be a much easier time if you're following this method flawlessly. And for the first time since Magic Crafters, you don't fully need to rely on Agent 9 to take down the boss here. Metalhead can be dealt with by having him shoot down his own power poles or luring him to send one of his monkey goons out to get you. This will warrant you some extra treasure needed for later on. By this point, you should have the 50 dragon criteria met, allowing you to carry on the Dream Reavers with only a couple more gems short for the required 6,000 to get to Nasty's World. From here, it's up to you whether you want to take these characters through all of the levels here and take down Jock. But since we're not going for 100%, all I really had to do was clean up the main hub, pick up some treasure here and there, and surpass the amount of treasure needed to get to Nasty. From here, it's smooth sailing to the end of the game. And I've got great news. If you don't feel like clearing all the levels here, leave it to Sergeant Bird to send you home from here on in. Have him fly his way to the end of North Cove and Twilight Harbor in virtually less than a few seconds, effectively skipping them altogether. And from here, it's on to Nasty Nork. Have Agent 9 take down the key-wielding thieves, then leave it to Sergeant Bird to finish the job. Not only is he capable of flying through this end section of the level, effectively skipping both chase segments, he's also able to deal damage to Nasty Nork himself. Strike him once, fly him all the way to the end of the level, then finish him off with a couple more rocket launchers where the sun don't shine. With Sergeant Bird having finished off Nasty Nork, that ends our journey with Spyro the Dragon. Can you beat Spyro 1 with all of these characters? Well, not really on their own, not entirely. It's not the most conventional method in the world, but I guarantee it can still be done if you bring all these guys together in one single playthrough. Who knows, maybe this method will also bring them far enough across the whole trilogy. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you ever so much for watching. This was quite a few days in the making and a fun experiment to try out with the power of Reignited mods. I would love to see speedruns and playthroughs attempting this method in the future. That's it for this video, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Catch you then.